Okay, welcome to Rider E for the FARBAR contract, which deals specifically with FHA and VA financing. So this is a rider that's used every time that FHA or VA financing is involved. It is inclusive of both, so you're going to choose which one you're going to use. It does cover some general items for both, and then has some specific items for each of them. So as always, buyer and seller name and address of the property. Initials go in here depending on who you represent, and when you present the offer. Generally, this is able to be filled out mostly by the buyer and the buyer's agent at the time of offer, and because it's unlike the disclosures, which is the condo disclosure and the HOA disclosure. This is something that is buyer directed and buyer driven. Okay, so give some general definitions for both. Paragraphs 1 and 2 deal specifically with, or deal universally with, both FHA and VA, talking about property definitions and so on and so forth. Inspections and appraisal. Note my note here that paragraph 2 applies to both FHA and VA, that this references appraisal specific repairs that are in addition to the repairs noted in the inspection portion of the contract. Meaning FHA and VA, they have some different appraisal guidelines, and when the appraisal comes in, you're going to look at that, and in addition to having a value, there may be some issues that are required, that the appraiser is requiring to be addressed prior to closing in order for FHA or VA to lend money. I'll give you some examples. Scraped peeling paint is a big one for FHA and VA. Also wood rot, they may note some, even though it may be on a wood destroying organism report later on or at the same time as well. It's just these are things that they're called VCs, or valuation contingencies, on an appraisal, and they are things that in order to lend money with that type of financing, they're going to have to be addressed either by the buyer or the seller. Now in here, if an amount is put in here, let's say it's $500, and let's say earlier you had done 0 repair limits on an as-is contract under the main body of the contract, then, which is paragraph 12 of the contract, then if the appraiser comes in and finds some other things that still need to be addressed, then the seller would be obligated up to any amount that's placed in here. If it's $500, if it's $50, if it's whatever, okay? If it exceeds that, then it's time to renegotiate. But at the point, if there's a dollar amount in there, so if you represent the buyer, you can put about $500 in there. If you represent the seller and your seller is concerned, know that they are obligating themselves up to that amount based only on the repairs that are noted and are mandated by the appraiser, which is different than those mandated or asked for by the buyer after the home inspection. So sellers want a smaller figure there, buyers want a bigger figure there, so wherever you meet in the middle is fine. So that's paragraphs 1 and 2. Paragraph 3 applies specifically for FHA financing. Make sure you read through all of this, okay? You want to check this box, all right? Note that in the FHA portion here, this is where, and I note this over here, you're going to put the initial offering price, because what you're saying is the house has to appraise for at least the price that we're offering initially, right? If there's amendments or there's counter offers going back and forth, whatever ultimate contract price you end up with, you should have that same amount in here, because it says the house basically has to appraise for purchase price. And but it doesn't say that in general. You'll learn later that the VA does, but it says it's specific, so you actually have to put an amount here, okay? If it doesn't appraise, then the buyer can cancel the contract if they can't agree to still get financing otherwise, or find a way that the seller's going to lower the price or whatever, then the buyer can dismiss himself from the contract and receive a refund of the earnest money. Subparagraph A, fees and prepayments. There's only one item, used to be more, but there's only one item that the seller is mandated. The purchaser shall pay all loan expenses, except, which means the seller has to pay a tax service fee, which, if charged by buyer's lender, shall be paid up to the seller to a maximum of blank. If you represent the buyer, understand that you should do some research and just find out what that would be from the lender. Say, hey, what would be your tax service fee? so I can put in a legitimate amount in there. Because if you put a maximum amount, let's say you put $300 in there, it's only going to be $45. A seller is going to look at that and say, okay, you want me to pay $300, and that's in addition to, that's normally a buyer's cost, becomes a seller's cost. So they're going to subtract that from your offer, and they maybe, when they're comparing offer A to offer B, may choose another offer if you have too high a fee. So I would suggest you get that information from the buyer's lender to find out exactly what's there. This does cover what happens if the cost of appraisal repairs exceeds the amount in paragraph 2. Paragraph 2 is that, remember up here, where we put in the amount of appraisal repairs we're asking the seller to obligate themselves to. Okay, so it covers all of that. Just certification says everything's true. We're not doing anything sketchy here. And then that was it. This is paragraph 4. It's kind of blocked over. Paragraph 4 starts, and that is going to be applicable if VA financing is in place. All right. Now in this one, there is no blank to fill in regarding the purchase price, so that it matches, the appraisal has to match the purchase price. This just says that if this contract purchase price or cost exceeds the reasonable value of the property, that's what they're calling an appraisal, then the purchaser shall have the right to continue on or cancel the contract. So you don't have to put an amount there. It automatically defaults to match what the ultimate purchase price is. Please note here in paragraph 4A, the fees and prepayments. Remember, we only had one. It was a tax service fee in the FHA addendum above. Here, this has WDO inspection, tax service underwriting, and doc prep fees required by the lender, and for recording fees for assigning a purchaser's mortgage. That could be expensive. All right. So again, I would encourage you to find out what those are so you can get those addressed and communicate that effectively to all parties. If you represent the seller, make sure you understand that that is a blank check. I'd said to look at my note at the bottom and listen to this audio. I'll go over that in a second. But you want to protect your seller from having a lender that says, hey, I'm going to do doc prep fees of $4,000, and the seller's already agreed to pay for that, right? And that's not kosher. So if you represent the seller especially, you don't want that to occur. So I'm going to show you some verbiage to use down here in a second to avoid that. Again, appraisal repairs are in there. And then paragraph 5 just says that if the buyer's going to elect, if it doesn't come in at appraised value and the buyer's going to elect to proceed, they need to make that election within 3 days. And it kind of references how that goes. And you need to read through this. As always, by the way, read through this entire contract and make sure, or rider, and make sure you know what's going on. Now, here's the note I referenced. It says, realize the seller mandated fees in 3A and 4A. Those are the things. The 3A is tax service fee for FHA, and 4A is WDO report, tax service fee, and whatever those items are up there for that. Document prep fee, and so on and so forth for VA. Could be a lot more for VA. FHA allows for a value to be placed in there. VA does not, and if the seller does not limit this somehow, it can open the door to a blank check on certain fees. Also note that in both FHA and VA, these closing costs would be in addition to any negotiated closing costs that are already in additional terms of the contract. Most FHA and VA deals already have the seller contributing toward the buyer's closing costs. Usually that's under the additional terms section of the main body of the FARBAR contract. And you'll see some certain verbiage in reference. I'm going to show you, especially if you have a VA buyer and you represent the seller, you want to try and protect, or you want to protect your seller. I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay. Here's a suggestion if you represent the seller in either FHA or VA, specifically VA in particular, because it has a little more open-endedness, okay? As I mentioned here, normally the seller is already paying closing costs for the buyer, so make sure that clause back in the main body of the contract reads something like this. Seller shall contribute 3% of the purchase price toward buyer's closing costs and or prepaids. This amount shall include any of the FHA or VA seller mandated costs outlined in the FHA/VA rider to the contract. What I'm saying is all these fees up here, let's say it's 3% of $200,000. So we got $6,000 in closing costs and they're going VA. That's fine. But all these fees right here that I'm referencing, the WDO, tax service, underwriting, and doc prep fees required by the lender, all right, that's going to be included in any other closing costs in that $6,000. So it's not on top of the $6,000. All right, because if you don't have that verbiage in there, you just say it's there and then the seller has to pay this, it could be $6,000 in closing costs, and then another $1,000 or $1,500 in these fees coming up here. So that's a way to protect yourself. As always, if you guys have any questions, reach out to me, and I hope this helps. This is a commonly used addendum required on FHA and VA deals. Thanks.